Welcome back to the challenge. I hope you're enjoying some of that Memphis sound. We thought we'd throw that in there for you. Thank you so much for that, Bishop McCarter. Brings a smile on my face. Dr. Kurland, we want you to continue, but if you don't mind, I'd like Dr. McKinney to respond just a little bit to what you've said so far, and you can continue with that, what you were sharing with him and with the listeners after he's had an opportunity to do that.
Dr.
McKinney.
I'd love to hear Dr. McKinney's response.
Sure.
Well, thank you. What you're suggesting and what you're advocating for is radically different from the ways that the Federal Reserve has behaved most recently. I would agree with you that the Federal Reserve not only saved Wall Street, in many respects, the Federal Reserve contributed to the banking and housing crisis by essentially not monitoring the activities of Wall Street and the whole mortgage-backed securities issue. I think the challenge is one of understanding what exactly the program that you're suggesting is going to, what it is and how is it going to work. I think that in principle, again, the more people who own and property, the better for not only for themselves, but also for the growth and stability of the country. In terms of one of the things that you mentioned in terms of growth of the U.S. economy, most economists would agree that the historic pattern of growth, of economic growth for our system is about 2.5–3% in normal times, and it can be higher coming out of recessions or recoveries. But long-term growth of the U.S. economy is about 3%. It's also true what you're saying that we do have tremendous underutilized resources that can and should be developed. I'm talking about human resources, and property ownership is only one piece of that puzzle. The other, in my view, more important piece is the development of human capital. And, that is not a Federal Reserve activity. That's really an activity of the whole social structure, including the schools and the family, et cetera. And I think that we have a long way to go to address the issue of human capital, because, quite frankly, giving people property without having human capital is a recipe for disaster. Just as we've seen, the disaster of the housing crisis was a situation where not only had Wall Street run amok, but there's a certain amount of blame that could be placed on the individuals who, through their own greed, took on more debt than they should have, and they were perhaps ill-advised or misled. But greed was at the heart of that crisis.
I think he certainly speaks to the responsibility of all of us, once engaged in this new paradigm that you refer to, where we're shifting, it from just creating jobs to ownership. Dr. Kurland, the responsibility of all of us to understand what it is that we're going to be held responsible for.
Right.
So I think that, I think that certainly factors in to the equation, and that brings on the need for further education when it comes to sharing these ideas and actually engaging people to participate in it. And I think we're fully aware of that, and I think that you addressed that in the plan. I want you to continue, because I can kind of sense that we've got a virtual library out there on the website. we when I asked Dr. Fred to look at it, it was short notice. I gave him about a week or so, and then his schedule, only God knows. So I'm not, I want to be fair to him and to to you and to us as well, and to our listeners especially,
Right.
when we talk about this Coalition for Capital Homesteading and empowering people. I often said it to you, Dr. Kurland, that I think this is the next leg of the civil rights movement, because civil rights, you dealt with the social injustices. Now we want to focus on economics, and I think that's where we ought to be as American citizens. Dr. Kurland, go ahead and continue. I'm sorry.
Well, good. Comment is that I agree that we're talking about a radical overhaul of the system. The system is something that human beings create and can recreate. And we use the term the just third way in order to say it's different than the Wall Street model of capitalism, or even capitalism. But it takes the best of capitalism. It's also different from socialism and communism. So that we're talking about an alternative system that was first conceived by Louis Kelso, a lawyer, and I worked with Kelso, and we got through the Congress laws to enable workers in the private sector to become owners without putting up any money. So there are about 11,000 companies with 11 million workers who would not have become owners without access to capital credits called ESOPs, or Employee Stock Ownership Plans. This is back in the 70s. But Kelso wrote back with Mortimer Adler a book with a terrible title. It was called The Capitalist Manifesto. And in that contains the ideas. And then they followed it up with another book called The New Capitalists in 1961. These are available on our website. You can download them free at cesj.org. And all of our writings are there, including my paper that was published by the Journal of Socioeconomics, an academic journal, called A New Look at Prices and Money, or the Kelsonian binary model for achieving rapid growth without inflation. Now, out of that, these are theoretical concepts. And from that, we developed something called the Capital Homestead Act. In other words, if President Obama is seeking to become a model economy again, based on economic justice, and Kelso and Adler defined that in Chapter 5 of their first book, The Capitalist Manifesto, that if he wants this to be a democratic economy, a just economy, where everybody, as a human being, has an equal right to accumulate capital through the same means we use for workers in the private sector. Capital credit that's repayable with the future earnings. You then have to look at the system, the tax system, and the monetary system primarily, but there are many other features in the law that affect who is going to own, who is going to have power, whether you're going to own or you're going to be owned. You see, the very important slogan that we use, own or be owned. And I, too, had some work in the 60s in Mississippi in the civil rights movement, so I was very close to what was going on there, and then wrote the guidelines in the War on Poverty and the community action programs for maximum feasible participation of the poor. I was on the wrong track. I thought you organize the people in order to get the government to redistribute through the tax system. This until in 1965, I discovered Kelso's ideas, and then went over to the Walter Reuther's Citizens Crusade Against Poverty to spread these ideas. Well, it's been taking a long time, but the time has now come for America and the world to be ready for something new, a radical overhaul of the tax system and a radical overhaul of monetary system. Both of these, again, are not given by God. They are social tools, and to the extent they're flawed, they can be recreated and redesigned. No problem. laws. That's what Congress is supposed to do, and the president should get behind it because this will help him be reelected. He's going to need something that will get the economy cranking again. In terms of, yes, historic rates are about 2.5%, 3% of growth. But when I was a kid in Bridgeport, Connecticut, you had 13 million of the most able-bodied workers out of the workforce in the military. And the economy was growing at 15% a year. That's telling you something, that the system, if there are customers behind the economy, and there were customers for weaponry, that the economy can grow and train people and put them to work. And that's what happened. So you had rapid rates of growth. But this is also telling you that there's a hidden, untapped capacity. And while Dr. Fred mentioned human capital, well, we separate humans from capital. These are just terms. We use the word workers or labor to define the human being, and obviously you can increase their productive capacity in many ways. The system helps do that. But capital we define as things, and that would be land, structures, machines. It's distinct from financial, what's called financial capital, but real capital, productive capital. And if in most of the studies that have been made indicate that most of the increases in wealth are not due to human beings becoming more productive, but rather technology. You can't change human nature, but you can change the technologies to do more and more with less and less human effort. And if you own that technology, and the technology is responsible for the production, increases in production, if you own it, then you're entitled to what's called profits, or the yield of capital. I think our